Ready to rock and roll? Is DOS? Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. We'd like to call this meeting for December 17th of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors to order. Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Ms. Hartman?
Here.
Mr. Adam? Mr. Williams?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mr. Lavanino?
I'm here.
Let the record reflect that Supervisor Adam is absent.
Okay. If you could all rise and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting of the minutes of the December 10th meeting?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Hart? Chair Lavanino?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous.
Very good. CEO Miyasato, do we have a CEO's report today?
We do. Good morning, Chair Lavanino and board members. Today I just wanted to recognize the Public Health Department for receiving an honorary award from the California Endowment last week. The Excellence in Health Equity Practice Award program recognizes public health departments doing work beyond the traditional scope of public health programs and advancing health equity through building internal infrastructure, working across government, fostering community partnerships, and championing transformative changes. The honor includes a $5,000 award to the department, and I've asked Dr. De Reynoso to come and say a few words about the award and their accomplishment.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the board, and CEO. We received this amazingly beautiful recognition last week from the California Endowment, from our peers, because of the work that we are doing in our community to ensure that farm workers have safe and consistent access to clean bathrooms. And so we were recognized because of the innovation in how we approach the work. So Supervisor Williams urged us to look into some concerns about farm workers not having access. So we partnered up with CAUSE, and we also engage the Ag Commissioner, growers, labor unions, farm workers, community advocacy groups, and as well as UC Merced, to really look at it from a very objective perspective, collecting data, as well as hearing about lived experience. And so we've met, the work group has been meeting all year round, and we have a few more meetings to go, and then we're hoping to bring back to your board for recommendations for your board to pick and choose and have an open conversation. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And also want to recognize Supervisor Hartman for your work on this issue, and Supervisor Wolf as
Yes.
well. I think it goes all the way back that long. So,
Yes.
Supervisor Hartman.
Well, it does. The previous supervisors in this very room had a big forum for farm workers to talk about health issues across different agencies. But I just want to thank you, Dr. Von De Reynoso, because this was your vision and your leadership to bring these groups together in this way. And I believe government has a role not just to command and control, but to facilitate and bring partners together in new ways. And that CAUSE stepped forward, and that you worked with that organization as well as growers and chippers and other in the ag community. This is how you begin to build understanding and trust. And you've been just a champion, and I'm really, really delighted that you've been acknowledged more broadly for this role. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
You know, one of the things that the interviewers asked us, what makes this possible? And I did say it was with the support of the board. So you were recognized as well by the endowment. So thank you for your support.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the
agenda today?
Yes, Chair Levanino and members of the board, I just have one quick announcement for today's agenda, and we are requesting to withdraw administrative item number 1. This is a resolution sponsored by Supervisor Levanino to adopt a resolution of commendation honoring David DeNoyer as the Veteran of the Month in Santa Barbara County, and I believe this is going to return to us at one of our later dates in January 2020. If we could just add that change to agenda to our balance, that would be good.
Excellent. Okay, are there any items that board members would like to pull from our administrative agenda? Oh, do we have resolutions? There are no resolutions? Ooh, amazing. All right, so are there any items that the public would like to pull?
Chair Lavanino and members of the board, I have one item to pull from the public, and that is administrative item number 17.
Is there anything from the board? Supervisor Williams?
Nothing.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know what? We're going to take one out of order, and that is going to be A23 because we have a special situation today, and if we could read A23 in, please.
Chair Lavanino and members of the board, administrative item number 23 comes from the sheriff. It is to consider recommendations regarding a transfer of ownership of retired sheriff's K-9, and there is a 4/5 vote required on this item.
Aw. You're going to go nuts in this.
Well, good morning, Chair Levanino, members of the board. It's my pleasure to be here today to formally retire one of our great canines, Magnum. And joining me today is his handler, Michael McNeil, and the entire canine posse from the Sheriff's Office, as you can see here. With Deputy McNeil and Magnum, we have, in order of seniority, Deputy Farley with his canine Odin, Custody Deputy with his narcotic detector canine Crypto, Deputy Scott with his canine Duke, and Deputy Moore with our newest addition to the Canine Corps, and that is Chop. And it's a great pleasure to be here to recognize a great canine, police canine, as well as his handler. Magnum came to us in May of 2013 from the English Police Dog Academy in Ventura County, where he was bred and trained. His father was a canine with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, and he is handled by Deputy Michael McNeil, and Deputy McNeil is kind of unique in that this is his second canine partner that he has had since he's been on the department. His first dog was Betty Blue von Haus Pija, more commonly known as Betty, and Betty was bred and born in Germany and served our agency from October 2005 to July of 2013. Betty was the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office first and only female canine. She, upon her retirement, continued living with the McNeil family. Sadly, she passed away on September 14th, 2018, at the ripe old age of 14, due to complications from old age. And during her 8 years on the job, she helped save many lives in Santa Barbara County. Magnum, Deputy McNeil's second dog, and the one that's about to retire, has been involved in numerous tracking operations, searches, and apprehensions of suspects, many of which ended up in surrender by the suspect. Magnum has been involved in over 40 narcotic-related searches. He's a cross-trained narcotic detector dog as well. He even won an award for narcotic searches at the Las Vegas Canine Trials. And an interesting story about Magnum, Deputy McNeil has taught Magnum to do something pretty interesting when he yells a certain word. So if you can tee that up. If everybody could hear that, but the word was snake. And he jumps very, very quickly. Magnum is 8 years old, and he is retiring, and like our tradition, you will approve a resolution where he will be sold to the McNeil family for $1, and live out his life with the people who he has been used to living with up until now. So, Deputy McNeil, thank you for your remarkable service twice as a canine handler for our sheriff's office. Thank you, Magnum, for a job well done, and we appreciate it, and best wishes for another long retirement with the McNeil family. And so, rather than a certificate or a badge, we thought that this would be something that Magnum would appreciate more. So hopefully he will take this and accept his retirement. Magnum, got
Awesome.
something for you, buddy.
Let's go down and get a picture with him.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, why don't you come over here?
Thanks, sir.
Supervisor Hartman?
I had some questions. So the dogs come trained, but I assume the officers have to be trained to work with the dogs. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that process?
Certainly, and I'll just briefly tell you something, and I'll ask Sergeant Jarrett Morris to come up here. He's our canine coordinator. He can give you a little bit more detail. But the dogs, as you say, receive their initial training prior to being matched up with a handler. The handler then does a training session with the dog so that they get acclimated to each other and learn to work with each other. And then on a continuous basis, as they're in service, they meet and train, and they typically train with other canine units as well. So it's a continuous learning process for both dog and handler. And Jarrett, would you like to come up and just give a little bit more background, maybe?
And then you also
Magnum?
compete, as you said, in Las Vegas, or to keep skills sharp.
Tell 'em about that.
Good morning. So just to add to what the sheriff was saying, we do train weekly. It's considered maintenance training. Plus the handlers do train with their dogs on a regular basis. Most of our dogs are dual purpose, meaning they are patrol dogs. They also either are narcotic detection or explosive detection dogs, and then are also tracking dogs, so they can find missing persons, criminals that have fled. In regards to your second question with competitions, some of our dogs have competed in canine trials throughout the state. Right now, most of our dogs are pretty young, so they haven't got to that level yet, but that is something that some of these handlers do aspire to do, is to participate in canine trials.
And if I may ask, how do officers get selected to work with the canines?
Good question, because we're testing this week. It's very competitive for the handlers. This is a job that they want. Not only do they get to have a new pet at home, a partner that they get to keep with them all the time. They get to drive around a cool car that says K9 on the side of it. So people like that job, but they have to go through a physical agility test. They have to go through an oral panel. And when we do that, we look at their stats throughout their career. We look at their evaluations from their supervisors, if they're good team players, if they work well solo, because these guys do have to travel all over the county and work without a supervisor sometimes. So it is very competitive. It is somebody that we're looking for, that we trust, and is a good worker.
Very cool. All right, well, congratulations and best wishes in your retirement there. He's starting to eat the his pension.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if Deputy McNeil maybe has a few remarks that he'd like to make, but you're certainly welcome to come up and.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Just want to let, it's been a pleasure. It's been my pleasure to been able to, fortunate enough to handle two dogs. For being a handler for over 14 years, to do some of the stuff and being involved in a lot of the things I've been involved in. As a canine handler, we're kind of the first ones in and kind of the last ones out when it comes to calls for service. But it has been a pleasure serving this community from Santa Maria all the way down to Carpinteria, from Guadalupe all the way to Cuyama. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you for accommodating our canine
Absolutely.
squad here. We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
That was also on behalf of General Services, so they didn't have to clean up anything out there. So. Yeah, it's like, actually, there's some. Yeah, it's a Belgian something or other. Okay, let's go to A17 then, please.
Chair Lavanino and members of the board, we have two requests to speak on administrative item number 17. This is from Public Health. It is to consider recommendations regarding an ordinance amending County Code Chapter 37A, licensure of tobacco retailers, Section 37A-7A, to include language to prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products, small and inexpensive pack sizes, and prohibit the mail order delivery of tobacco products. And we are going to begin in Santa Barbara with Monica Merriman and then return to Santa Maria with Isis Dominguez. Monica?
Good morning, Chairman Lavanino and Board of Supervisors. My name is Monica Merriman, and I am the Executive Director for the Central Coast Division of the American Heart Association. I am also a parent and a concerned citizen. I want to start by thanking you for your bold leadership in working to keep tobacco products out of the hands of our youth. The ease of availability of flavored tobacco is contributing to an increase in youth tobacco use of epic proportion. Candy flavors, mint, and menthol make tobacco products more attractive and addicting to kids because they mask the harsh taste of tobacco. They are telling us this over and over again. This is why the industry considers these starter products for youth and other inexperienced tobacco users. We know that a tobacco retail license is the best way to enforce a flavor ban. Please guarantee that the license fee is at least enough to cover the cost of enforcement and compliance. Please also require compliance checks for retailers who have found to be in violation of the policy. On behalf of the American Heart Association, we support the restriction of all flavored tobacco products. This evidence-based policy is essential for reducing youth tobacco use. With your commitment to our youth, Santa Barbara County could join a growing list of communities across the state and the nation that have enacted a strong and well-enforced flavored tobacco sales restriction. Thank you for your leadership in protecting the next generation from nicotine addiction. Thank you.
And we are going to return to Santa Maria for our final speaker, Isis Dominguez. Isis?
Good morning, Supervisors. Good morning. We, the tobacco consumers and retailers of Santa Barbara County, recognize that there is a problem with minors' access to flavored tobacco products, and we agree that something needs to be done about this problem. However, the proposed measure is far too overreaching and will hurt more people than it will help in the aggregate. So, we, the tobacco consumers and retailers of Santa Barbara, have convened and discussed possible solutions and have come up with a balanced measure that we would like to present to board members next month. This balanced measure would prohibit minors' access to flavored tobacco products, yet maintain the rights of adult ex-smokers of Santa Barbara County to remain literally smoke-free. We have studies showing that cigarettes are 9 to 450 times less toxic than conventional cigarettes. The assortment of vape flavors available play a very important role in helping ex-smokers transition away from cigarettes and into the much less harmful smoke-free alternative to vaping. The vast majority of ex-smokers choose flavors other than tobacco when vaping. A ban on flavored tobacco products, especially flavored vaping products, will force these citizens who are also voters and taxpayers to A, purchase their products outside of the county, thereby hurting the local economy, B, resort to black market products, which would pose a serious health risk, or C, to simply go back to smoking cigarettes. There is more to reality than what we have been led to believe by the media, and we hope that members of the board would keep an open mind in listening to what we have to say about the subject before resorting to knee-jerk and overreaching prohibitions that will likely hurt more people than help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And that was our final speaker.
Okay. Can I get a motion to move the administrative agenda with also the changes that our clerk had indicated at the beginning?
Second?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Hart?
Aye.
Chair Lavanino?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous.
Okay. Takes us to public comment.
Chair Lavanino, members of the board, we have 7 requests to speak on general public comment today, and we are going to begin in Santa Barbara with Ed Kolaski, to be followed by Jeff Jones. Ed?
Thank you. Last meeting, you guys passed a resolution against China for wrongdoing. Now I ask that you pass a resolution against Alex Peugeot for wrongdoing at the Board of Architectural Review. And side note, it now costs $100,000 more for me to remodel my house than it did in 2014. So how about passing a resolution against Alex Peugeot? You know, Alex and you, because you're responsible for this, would not let us talk. He would not let us present our design. He kicked us out in 15 seconds. We weren't even allowed to say a single note. Nothing. They had Dylan jump up and scream at us. So I think it's time for the board to take a stand against the Board of Architectural Review, that is against Alex Peugeot. You know, Mr. Chairman, you were the first one I talked to about the problem at the Board of Architectural Review over 5 years ago. And all this time, you haven't said a single word about the Board of Architectural Review or about Alex Peugeot. Why do you think Alex lied? I mean, for 5 years he was lying. For 5 years he was saying that our second story is located solely over the garage when clearly it wasn't. You know, it took Supervisor Peter Adam not even 2 seconds at looking at the drawing, and it was an architectural drawing that I used to display, to realize that it's not solely over the garage. So why did he lie, Mr. Chairman? You're in charge now. It's not Janet Wolf, who ramrodded this and wouldn't even let me talk to her. We should know. We should know who's in charge. I used to ask that question over and over again in the early years. Who's in charge? Because I couldn't find out who's in charge. I assumed it was Janet Wolf. So why does it prevail now? Janet has retired. Why is Alex still here? He wouldn't even let us show our drawings to the other members. So how did they know what to vote on? He took their word for it. We made no changes. We added over 300 square feet as requested by 2 of the members. And he didn't even show them the drawings. You know, is this how they go in China? You need a resolution against Alex Peugeot, and it's time that it get passed. You passed one against China. Let's pass one here at home against the corruption downstairs and get rid of it. Thank you.
We are going to stay in Santa Barbara for Jeff Jones, and then we're going to return in Santa Maria for Carolyn Mazzeo. Jeff?
First of all, I'm Jeff Johnson, and I want to speak about right here in the corner of the county building near the Federal Express box. You have drug dealing, prostitution, every drug, opiates, heroin, meth, people walking around right outside the door right here, where your employees can't even walk out, right in front of the sunken gardens. You have kids. I'm homeless, but that's despicable. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never been to prison. Right outside your door near the FedEx box. And at night, you have people walking around. They're not people. They're zombies. And you have them walking around where your employees can't even exit the door right there. And this goes on all night. You have tarps, tents, umbrellas, drugs. It's despicable. And it shouldn't happen. As a human and a law-abiding citizen, even if I'm homeless, that should not happen in Santa Barbara. Right there on your door at night, near the FedEx box, you have 25 people doing drugs, prostitution, the whole nine. That's negative. I can go codes, 11.550s. You have 11.350s. You have needles, trash, right outside the door to my right on the first floor. And I've had employees tell me, I can't even get out the door. You shouldn't have that. You got a police department 2.5 blocks up the street. That should not happen. And you have a lot of people right in front of the sunken gardens. You have kids. I love them. Doggies. You have everything. Restaurants, the little kitchen. And right outside the door, you have drug-infested people. Meth heads, crackheads, heroin addicts. And that should not be, it's not appropriate. Something should be done. And I know the law.
Mr. Johnson, your
My
time's up.
boss was Sherman Block, LA County. So I know what the law is, and I know what bad people do. You got people walking around all over this building all night on meth, crack, cocaine, heroin, opioids.
Mr. Johnson, your time's up. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to return to Santa Maria with Carolyn Mazzeo, to be followed by Dr. Bill Heath.
Good morning, Supervisors, and thank you very much for the opportunity to provide public comment on a topic that's not currently on your agenda. My name is Carolyn Mazzeo. I'm a homeowner in and a resident of Vandenberg Village, California, which is part of the unincorporated area of Santa Barbara County, commonly referred to as Lompoc, but quite honestly, we're outside of the city limits of Lompoc and do not receive law enforcement services from Lompoc Police. I'm here to say that I'm opposed to the proposed Aegis methadone Suboxone medication unit in Vandenberg Village. I'm certain that I speak for thousands of Vandenberg Village residents who also oppose the Aegis facility in our community. We all understand the need for treatment to help people overcome opioid addiction, but Aegis's proposed location at 3769 Constellation Road would not serve the needs of its Lompoc's clients, as it states. 92% of their Lompoc clients live within the city of Lompoc, which is 2 miles from Vandenberg Village. Transportation from Lompoc City to Vandenberg Village, public transportation, is extremely limited. Public buses run approximately once per hour on weekdays and not at all on the weekends. As far as walkability, it's extremely inaccessible. The 2 miles contain some sidewalks, but many areas that do not have sidewalks, or bike paths that are not well lit and are not patrolled by police or sheriff's deputies. As far as parking, if these people are fortunate enough to have private transportation to the facility on Constellation, there's very, very limited public parking because the building that Aegis has identified as a prospective clinic it is an office building, not a medical building. And the parking spaces for the tenants of the building are limited to, I believe, 1, maximum 2 per office space, and there's no on-street parking. If Aegis's goal is to help their clients conquer addiction, their clinic should be accessibly located in the city of Lompoc, regardless of potentially higher lease costs to Aegis. And speaking of lease costs, I'm also here to express the growing frustration and mounting anger in the Vandenberg Village community by what's perceived as unnecessary delays by Aegis in withdrawing its application for a conditional use permit for the facility they hope to open at 3769 Constellation. We were assured 3 weeks ago that Aegis was withdrawing the application. They gave Supervisor Hartman their word that they were withdrawing their application for the conditional use permit. Yet here I stand a full 3 weeks later, and nothing has happened. We've heard one excuse after another, all of which pertain to Aegis's negotiations with the leasing agent, the landlord, the building owner. In truth, these issues have no bearing on the permit application withdrawal. Prevailing community opinion is that Aegis is stalling and that we've been told lies about their intent as well as about the county processes. I respectfully request that the Board of Supervisors and their appointed planning commissioners maintain awareness of the application, its status, and work coherently with Aegis to expedite the withdrawal of their permit application. The Vandenberg Village community has remained peaceful and respectful in its opposition to this proposed facility. However, our patience has been tried, and our trust in elected officials, quite honestly, has been significantly eroded. We'll continue to shine a light on the ill-advised permit application, but we would appreciate your vigilance in helping to represent your constituents in this county. Thank you very much for your time.
And our next speaker is Dr. Bill Heath, to be followed by Margaret Mercereau, who is speaking for Ramona Rogers.
I'm going to have Ramona speak first, and I'll speak after.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's upside down. There we go.
Good morning, Supervisors and Chairman. My name is Margaret Mercereau, and I'm speaking for Ramona Rogers as she has laryngitis. She's former chair of the Santa Barbara County Human Services Commission. She served under her friend Tim Staffel, who she's known since middle school at Vandenberg Junior High, now a judge, the Honorable Timothy Staffel, and the late Joni Gray. She comes as a longtime resident of Vandenberg Village, having graduated from Cabrillo, gone away to college, and returned to raise her children that are now grown. Most of us have people we love or at least know who have struggled with addiction. We are keenly aware of its epic toll on the beautiful people of this nation and of Santa Barbara County. However, if the community would have been consulted before the paperwork for the proposed methadone clinic was set in motion, it would have been quickly learned that the limited commercial areas of Vandenberg Village is unsuitable. In just 1 month, we have collected the signatures of 1,253 online petitioners and 297 written signatures for a total of 1,550 3rd District residents who strongly, and I make it known very strongly, feel that Vandenberg Village is the wrong location for this clinic. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Dr. Bill Heath, to be followed by Samantha Yavragas.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for your service and the opportunity to address you. I'm Dr. Bill Heath, lifelong resident of Vandenberg Village. I'm also a member of the Lompoc Unified School District Board of Education. So I'd just like to express my concern and opposition to the proposed methadone clinic at Vandenberg Village. I own the building and practice dentistry in the property directly next door to the proposed clinic. So I have a vested interest in the safety of our community and on several levels. I believe you received letters from the superintendent of schools from Lompoc and from the Board of Education expressing concern and opposition to the proposed clinic. So I hope you receive those and listen to those. Daily I see children, youth, adults run, walk, enjoy the neighborhood that's there along Constellation Road. I have good memories of riding my bike there as a child myself, having attended Buena Vista Elementary School, Cabrillo High School, my children, 6 children, doing the same thing. So Vandenberg Village is kind of a special place in our county. If you haven't been there, welcome you to come and see what it's like. Appreciate Ms. Hartman coming and having meetings with us and for what she's trying to do. I expressed my concern because we were, in another way, we were told that a cannabis retail store would not be opened up across the street. Yesterday I received a notice pending approval of a second delivery service for cannabis in Vandenberg Village. So seems like the retail store shifted to a delivery service. So I know that's a different topic, different process, but we'd like to keep Vandenberg Village safe, free from drugs that we believe can be harmful to our youth and our children. We appreciate, again, your service to our community. We know you'll do the right thing. Treat Vandenberg Village as if it's your own community. But we know that Vandenberg Village is not the place for a methadone clinic. And so please consider all that we've discussed with you previously and again. And we look forward to hearing final notice that the Aegis Clinic will not be in Vandenberg Village. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Samantha Yavegas, to be followed by Edwin Weaver.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Samantha Yavegas, and I'm here with Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley. I'm here to speak on behalf of our youth action group. They are very sad they couldn't be here, but it's finals week, so I just wanted to relay a message that they're very proud and thankful of the attention the board has brought to the flavor issue with tobacco. They're very aware of the impact it's had in their schools, in their families, and their peers, and they appreciate the attention you brought and the action you have taken. So thank you so much on behalf of our youth group.
And our final speaker is Edwin Weaver. Edwin?
I too wanted to thank you this morning for your attention to the issues of flavored tobacco. Specifically, I think this issue isn't just about what's happening today, but it's the long-term effects of tobacco on our kids and our community. And by addressing this and taking the long view, it shows real leadership as supervisors of our county. I'm really pleased. Thank you, Supervisor Lavanino, representative mine here in Santa Maria. Really appreciate your support, and really glad that you guys voted yes. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And that was our final speaker.
Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gazzoni, could you outline the framework for public comment on issues not on our agenda and what we can say and can't say?
Chair and supervisors, the board or the CEO or any member of staff, basically for matters that are not on the agenda, you can provide a short report, you can have short questions, you can direct CEO to put something on the agenda in the future. And if there are specific questions on the Aegis matter, I could go further.
If it's okay, I would just like to describe what has occurred to date for everyone. I think the community has made its voice loud and clear on this issue. I have also made it clear that this application was submitted to planning and development, and unlike many other potentially controversial projects, I was not notified ahead of time. And so we did hold a community meeting. I think there were over 200 people there. The community feels very intensely about this. We did speak with the CEO of Aegis, and he told me on the phone they would withdraw their application. He provided written notice of that. When it didn't happen immediately, we got in touch with him. He said that he wanted to first negotiate the lease and getting out of that lease contract. It's my understanding that they did have the final walkthrough on the building, so I expect any moment that we will, in fact, have the withdrawal from P&D, and the planner is on notice to let us know as soon as that happens, and we will be in touch with the community. But we have tried very much to be responsive, and we are, you have stood up and made clear your position, and we've heard you, so thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm going to walk a fine line, and you can stop me if I step over, but I also, I understand this, but we have to remember where all those people are going now. So those people are all coming to my district to be treated. And so I hope for a resolution that works for all districts and all individuals. So we'll leave it at that and move forward. So thank you for being here today. Okay, let's go to, we don't need a break, do we? Or are we good to move forward? Do you want to take a little break? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break before we get into our departmental agenda items. It's a good time. Supervisors, and Madam Clerk, can you read item D1, please?
Chair Lavanino and members of the board. Departmental item number 1 is from the County Executive Office. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding an update on legislative advocacy and adoption of the 2020 legislative platform.
Good morning, Chair Lavanino, members of the board, Dennis Bazanich from the County Executive Office. I'm here this morning with Cliff Berg and Don, our advocates, our legislative advocates in Sacramento and in D.C., to prepare for a final adoption of the legislative platform for 2020, as well as for you to receive an update on the status of our efforts during the past year to advocate for your funding priorities, your legislative priorities, as well as general policy advocacy at the state and federal level. And then also to consider a resolution this morning to change the status and reestablish the Legislative Program Committee as a standing committee from its current status as a separate committee, a standing committee of your board. So with that, what I'd like to do is just turn it over at this point to Don for a recap of the federal accomplishments and maybe a little idea of what might happen next this year. So, Don?
Thank you. Chair Lavanino, members of the board.
Click it.
Chair Lavanino, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and
Is that
Associates.
on? I'm sorry, Don. We probably got some
I
faulty
think I might
equipment
have
somewhere.
muted
It's on? Hey, maybe closer. Just because Doss is in
Thank
Santa
you.
Barbara, I want you to be able to hear. All right.
Congress is in the final week of the legislative year and is scrambling to finish up just about everything that they've worked on in 2019. And that is somewhat typical for the way Congress operates. The focus this week is on the appropriations for fiscal year 2020. House and Senate leaders have put together 2 consolidated appropriations packages that will be voted on in the House today. And if passed, the Senate will take them up in the near future with the aim to get things wrapped up by the end of the week. These packages were released late yesterday. We've reviewed them to the best of our ability. Things appear to be in good shape for the county's priorities on funding programs. Things like the community development block grants, the homeless assistance grants programs, home investment, state and local law enforcement grants, and the like, all appear to receive modest increases that will ensure that these programs continue to fund the county's priorities next year. Also, the payments in lieu of taxes program is fully funded, and that will be continuing into next year as well. So we're looking for that to be resolved this week. In addition to appropriations, there's a number of program authorizations that we've been working on. Most of these became hung up in the committee process and did not proceed to floor passage in the House and the Senate. And what House and Senate leaders have elected to do is to simply extend them into next year in order to allow Congress to come back in 2020 to take them up again. We want to see multi-year authorizations for these programs that protect and expand their scope and ensure that the funding will be authorized, that the Appropriations Committee can then come back to fund in the annual appropriations bills. So, for instance, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program and the Federally Qualified Health Centers, they've been extended into May of next year. The National Flood Insurance Program is extended into September. And so this ensures that there will be a lot of dealing and horse trading in the legislative process next year as Congress seeks to take these up. Congress is also working this year to finish up the Defense Authorization Bill, and that's the legislation that includes the Camp 4 legislation. We expect that to be voted on in the Senate either today or tomorrow, and that will be the final step that clears it for the White House and the President's signature. So there's quite a bit going on this week. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you and your staff on the federal platform that you'll adopt, and we look forward to next year. Certainly, there'll be a lot going on next year, probably an infrastructure package or a highway infrastructure package at least will be taken up. We'll see a lot going on with healthcare, and I think exactly how that comes down will be largely determined by what happens in the presidential race and what the candidates stake out for their positions. A number of other things will be going on as well. Climate change will be a significant issue in the next Congress as well. And looking for any opportunities to advocate for the county and take advantage of these issues that are coming up. So I'd be pleased to respond to any questions that you have.
Do we have any public comment on this?
My suggestion is we complete the rest of the presentation, and then we could do
All right.
questions.
So are there any questions for Don, or do you want to do the whole thing and then? Okay, go ahead, Cliff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cliff Berg, here to give you an update and assessment of the future. We in California, in Sacramento, are in the California legislative recess. We're in the middle of a 2-year legislative session that began a year ago in December, went through September. Legislature recessed in September, and they will return in less than a month on January 6th for the beginning of the 2-year session. The legislative 2-year session in California is fairly unique around the states in the sense that legislators introduced bills in January, February of 2019. We work closely with your staff, departments, and board offices to review all the bills that are introduced, several thousand, determined those that are important and impacted the county, and took positions on those. When the legislature returns, any bill that's still left is what we call a 2-year bill. It's in the House of Origin. It must get out by the end of January or it dies, and then the legislature will have an opportunity through February to reintroduce or introduce new bills to be considered in 2020. 2019, looking back a bit, I think it was a truly interesting year in California. It was first off the end of 8 years of the Brown administration and a change in governorship after having 16 years of Governor Brown, really, in 2 different terms. And I think the new governor took a very different tack, which is worth observing that after the last 8 years of Governor Brown, who with the Democratic legislature pretty much presented a conservative budget with very few initiatives, spent 5 months dickering with Democrats in the legislature who were pushing him to adopt ideas or funding for programs that they wanted the state to fund, and then negotiating through the May revise and trying to put a hold on state spending. The new governor clearly had a very proactive agenda, and in a lot of ways preempted the legislature early on with his budget proposals, including in his January budget $500 million for homeless, investments in emergency readiness response, early childhood education, healthcare expansion, immigration. So this governor came in with a wide variety of proposals and did not wait for the legislature to put forward their proposals and react. And so the legislature, in essence, responded to the governor. The new state budget will be proposed in January when the legislature returns, around January 9th. And it'll be interesting to see whether, the governor continues his proactive approach to the state budget. The last budget had roughly a $22 billion state surplus. The ledge analysts in the last couple of weeks predicted the next year budget will have roughly a $7 billion surplus. The county, we work closely, as I said, with your departments and the county administrator's office on plugging them into the discussion of the various budget proposals. Probably the one that was the most concern to the county was a change in the realignment formula under AB 85 that would have resulted in a reduction of over $2 million in county revenue, which is the first item that you'll see up there. I'm pleased to report that we were successful in working with the administration and a small group of other counties who were also impacted, including Sacramento, to get the Department of Finance by the end of the day and the end of the May revise to agree to exempt Santa Barbara County from the change in the formula, which was done through a State Department of Finance letter, which saved the county roughly $2.1 million potential revenue loss. A lot of different things, obviously, in the budget, which are plugged into a whole variety of different areas. One that I did want to mention in last year's budget was the governor's homeless proposal, which in January he proposed $500 million, may revise up to $650 million. But in the course of the time frame between the May revise and the final budget wrap-up, cities made a major effort to change the governor's formula and take the money that was earmarked for counties. And probably that homeless distribution formula was the last budget item that the legislature decided in the last trailer bill because of how hotly contested the formula issue was in terms of distribution. Santa Barbara was able to weigh in, and I think, at the end of the day, we didn't get the exact formula the counties would have preferred, but we certainly got a very significant increase above what the cities had proposed in the earlier discussions. As we look forward to the next year, we continue to work on a public health issue, which is known as the 340B issue, which is down your list, which is a result of the governor's earlier executive order this year, which would potentially reduce county funding for our health care centers as a result of changing the way that counties can calculate savings under the 340B program. We have been working closely with the administration and the public health department to try to come up with a solution, as well as all the other stakeholders. There's been ongoing conversations and meetings in Sacramento throughout the year, and we continue to work on those, trying to come up with a solution that we can sell the administration on to either hold the county harmless or to backfill the potential loss. I think that will be an ongoing issue that goes into the next fiscal year and may emerge as a budget issue. Looking at the crystal ball for next year, there are a number of issues that are out there that will impact the county. The governor has a proposal called CalAIM, which is intended to reform and streamline and make the Medi-Cal healthcare system more effective in California. It's a multi-year proposal. We are Following that closely, the governor appointed a task force chaired by Sacramento Mayor Steinberg and LA County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas on the homeless issue. We believe that task force will come up with recommendations shortly and make recommendations to the governor and the legislature to address the homeless crisis in the state. And that is closely aligned with an ongoing review in Sacramento of mental health funding, particularly mental health funding that is a result of Proposition 63. Hearing last week in the State Assembly, reviewing how that money is spent. Mayor Steinberg was the leadoff witness at that hearing and indicated a desire to see the state start enacting performance review and outcome-based budgeting in terms of how mental health money is being spent. And on another track, we have a state master plan on aging as a result of legislation enacted by Senator Jackson that is starting the process that ties in both with CalAIM and the mental health issue. So all of those issues, mental health, health care, seniors, homelessness, are going to be in play in the upcoming session of the legislature. The other big issue out there that you're all familiar with, of course, is PG&E, power shutoffs, and energy services in California, which continues to evolve with the governor just in the last week rejecting their bankruptcy plan. So just a flavor of the big issues that we will be hearing about in Sacramento. I want to close by both thanking Senator Jackson and Assemblywoman Lamone and their offices and staffs for working closely with the county in Sacramento on all these budget items, all these bills that are in our various reports. And I want to thank the county administrator's office and your departments and all of your own staffs for working with us closely over the year. And I especially want to thank Dennis, who is leaving, who I've worked closely with over the last 3 years and, has been critical to our success in Sacramento. So we will miss him, and I will miss him, but I know you'll have a good replacement. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for that. Just Dennis, comments?
Yeah, a couple other things just to finish up. So again, I want to thank both Don Gilchrist and Cliff Berg for the great work they've done both in Sacramento and in DC this year, advocating on your board's behalf, as well as for all the residents of Santa Barbara County. Just to follow up on the platform which you would be considering for adoption today, last month we brought that forward to you for your review and comment. We didn't receive any comments, and so we made no substantive changes to either the principles or the planks in the platform that's before you today. And as I commented last month, most of the changes that were made between the 2019 platform and the 2020 platform were really about updating information and making sure it was the most current. And so we didn't make any additional changes since last month. Also on your agenda today is the consideration of approval of a resolution that will reestablish the Ledge Program Committee as a standing subcommittee of the Board of Supervisors. The membership of that reestablished subcommittee will remain the 2 supervisors, which you will have the opportunity to appoint again at your reorganization meeting in January. And the purpose of that committee to oversee the legislative advocacy efforts of Santa Barbara County will remain unchanged through that resolution, as well as then letting you know that staff support will continue. And so the recommended actions for your board today is to receive the update from our legislative advocates, adopt the county's 2020 legislative platform, adopt the resolution reestablishing the Ledge Program Committee as a standing committee of your board, and then find that the proposed actions do not constitute a project within the meaning of CEQA. And with that, we're available for answering any questions.
All right, and is there any public comment at this time?
Chair Lavanino, members of the board, we have no requests to speak.
Okay, Supervisor Hart.
I had a couple questions. Thank you, Mr. Gilchrist and Mr. Berg, for being here. At the federal level, I see that the administration has proposed tightening the eligibility for supplemental nutritional assistance program, and I think that is scheduled to begin in April. That will have a significant impact on a lot of people here in Santa Barbara County who are struggling to survive, and I know it provides a relatively modest benefit to those folks. But is there anything that we can do to help pressure the administration, working through our congressional representative, to turn that decision around?
That is an issue we have been tracking since the rule was proposed about a year ago, I believe. The focus for the proposed rule, we could see it coming and we were concerned about it, was to have comments to the agency to encourage them to modify it or rescind it. And I know that our legislators were very active on that. There was a letter sent, a joint letter in the Senate that was sent with dozens, if not a majority of the Senate that signed it. The administration essentially disregarded those comments and has finalized the rule, so it's going to go into effect. And so now the next focus is on the implementation, working with the agencies perhaps, and hopefully working through the legislative process to somehow ameliorate the situation. That can be done through the appropriations process with policy writers. It's difficult to do it that way, but it's possible. But I know the committees, especially in the House, that have jurisdiction will be reviewing it and doing what they can legislatively. When you have divided government, a legislative solution to an executive action like this is difficult, but it's something that is of concern to enough people that I think will be making a run at that.
Well, thank you for that. And Mr. Berg, you mentioned the challenges that potentially face the Mental Health Services Act funding and the review that's going on now about how those dollars are spent countywide. I know there's a lot of different approaches to that in different counties around the state, and that Mayor Steinberg and Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas have both expressed concerns about the allocation of that funding at the county level and whether enough of that money is going to homeless services. But there are a lot of programs here in our county that are really critical to use that money. Is there a way that we can best make our case that we have been appropriately using those funds and put ourselves in a better
yeah,
position?
I mean, I think we have the time to do that. That process just is starting, so it's the beginning of the process. So, I mean, I think we need to, I will work with your staff to, be able to articulate those areas where we are using that money to ensure that we protect it, and to, make sure that our legislative delegation is aware of that, as well as CSAC and, other stakeholders as these discussions evolve. So, I think we do have the opportunity because we're at the beginning of the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Williams, you good?
I do want to, number one, chime in agreement on the point that Supervisor Hart raised about our mental health funding. I think that is an issue we're going to have to get deeply involved in next year at the state level. And then I just want to thank both of our lobbyists for doing their work. These are strange times in government, and I really appreciate it. And then on the Ledge platform, I just wanted maybe to, if Dennis could address a little bit the conversations about adding some more planks on early childhood education. I know that's been a request, and just where are we with that? Obviously, some of it's going to have to wait till next year, but can you tell me about that process? Because I, for one, think that being involved in early childhood education is an important part of the role for the Board of Supervisors.
Chair Lavanino, Supervisor Williams, we have certainly from the staff of First Five have had a higher level of participation in our LEDGE program committees by staff from First Five. There are a number of initiatives that are statewide initiatives for First Five commissions up and down the state that our local First Five commission is interested in implementing. The discussion in terms of really filling out perhaps some planks was somewhat deferred to next year to make sure that the First Five Commission itself, as an independent body, had sufficient time to develop their legislative priorities and then bringing those to the county for alignment with our legislative platform so that they would work in alignment with one another going forward was the suggested strategy that First Five is looking at this point. So the reasonable anticipation would be that during the spring, the staff and the First Five Commission itself would make those determinations about legislative priorities, build those into the 2021 platform development process during the next summer of 2020, and then have those in front of your board, entire board, for inclusion or possible inclusion in the 2021 platform.
Supervisor Williams, this is CEO Miyasato, and just to remind everyone that if it's not in our LEDGE platform, it doesn't mean the county can't advocate for it. So the LEDGE platform is just to have clarity for our advocates so they know what our priorities, but it doesn't prevent us from advocating on First Five issues.
Supervisor Hart.
Yeah, in addition to working with First Five, I think it'd be a good idea to also include the Santa Barbara County Child Care Planning Council. They are equally interested in early childhood education. I serve as liaison from the board to that commission, so I'd be happy to take that conversation to the council.
Supervisor Hartman.
And the Kids Network as well. I just wanted to also add that the LEDGE committee meets monthly, and we talk about, we get superb updates from from Mr. Gilchrist and Mr. Berg about federal and state issues each month, and a lot of county departments participate, as well as our from Senator Jackson and Assemblymember Lamone's office. So just for people who don't know how all of this happens, and then sometimes we do pass board resolutions, and then that flips into letters and things. And Dennis has been shepherding this process and has done so for quite some time, and we're going to miss you in that role. So I just wanted to express my gratitude.
You know, and I just wanted to thank both of our lobbyists. If you ignore this, and then you have I think we noticed during like the 1-9 debris flow, the relationships that have been developed over years, whether it's Public Works with Scott McAlpin, Tom Fayram, through the help of Mr. Gilchrist and Mr. Berg up in Sacramento. But, you know, it's that ability for Tom or Scott to get on the phone the day of a disaster and have that person's cell phone number, and that person on the other end knows who you are and is able to provide assistance. You know, we were able to get $110 million from the Army Corps during the 1-9 debris flow. And would we have received that level of response if we didn't have those relationships? I would hope so. But, you know, it's always nice to have that, so that when we need something, we know the right people to go to. And just from my own experience of traveling around with Don and with Cliff, you know, we're meeting the right people. We're seeing the right folks. They know Santa Barbara County's positions, and just really wanted to thank both of you for the great work that you do for all the people of Santa Barbara County. So thank you. All right. With that, have a great, safe journey back. And Supervisor Hart.
I'll make a motion to approve B, C, and D and the staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Hart?
Aye.
Chair Lavanino?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous.
Okay, let's go to item 2.
Chair Lavanino and members of the board, departmental item number 2 is from Community Services. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding adjustments to county parks fees for special events, aquatic programs, and camping fees, and establishing new fees.
Mr. Hanson, how are you today? And Mr.
Mr. Bailey. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Before I kick it over to Sherman and Lynn, I'd like to briefly recognize some of our park staff for the stellar work this year, especially our park rangers and our maintenance workers. I truly believe we have a world-class park system, and it's because of their work. As you're likely aware, most of our parks revenues comes from our camping parks. For every $1 you invest in us, we yield 3 back in the form of user fees and the revenues. At Halama Beach, I'd like to recognize the good work of Dan Peterson and our Ranger 3, Luke Anderson. At Kachuma Lake, I'd like to recognize our new operations manager, Todd Stepien, and Ranger 3's Jeff Bozarth and Graham Williams. Down in the South County, I'd like to recognize Billy Mann, who's our new operations manager, and we have our parks superintendent, Jeff Lindgren, here in the audience. Lastly, I'd like to recognize our reservation call center, who fields nearly 30,000 calls a year with an average wait time of less than a minute. This is led by Suzanne Isbell, and the other folks on the phone are Mike Smith, Susan Wilcox, and Roberto Borquez. I'm sure I mispronounced that. I'm sorry. At this time, I'd like to pass along to Sherman Hanson, our Community Services Business Manager and birthday boy, and Lynn Semenza, our Department Business Specialist and Reservation Expert.
Good morning, Chair Lavagnino and the members of the board. Today, the Community Services Department, Parks Division, will present to you recommendations for modification of county-wide park fees. So staff recommends, 1, to adjust county park fees for special events, day-use park facilities, aquatics programs, and camping fees, and to establish new fees. 2, to authorize the Community Services Director the authority to offer discounted or promotional camping fees during times of low vacancy levels. And to authorize the Community Services Director the authority to adjust fees as needed on an annual basis for tents, cabins, yurts, and RV hookup sites based on Consumer Price Index. And finally, to determine that the adoption of the resolution is exempt from CEQA.
Great.
So park fees were last updated by the Board of Supervisors in July of 2017. We have benchmarked and evaluated these fees against similar jurisdictions and competitors, including Ventura and San Luis Obispo counties, California state parks, City of Santa Barbara, as well as other private parks in our area. These staff is proposing an adjustment to these existing fees as well as establishing new fees. And these park fees help offset costs to park operations, including grounds maintenance, utilities, infrastructure repair, and ranger supervision and administration.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. As Ryder mentioned, we have a little pie chart here with the makeup of how we fund our operations of approximately $16 million budget. As you can see from the yellow slide, or the yellow pie on the slide, about $6 million of that is charges for services. That's what we're here to update is our fees. Going on down the line, we get about a little over $1 million. Actually, this year we're tracking more towards $1.3 million from concessionaires. That's our restaurants at some of our parks. On a side note, if you haven't had the opportunity to go to Kachuma Lake and try out the Hooked Bar and Grill, I highly recommend it. I was a ranger out at Halama for 15 years, and the Hooked Burger, Kachuma Burger, is on par with the Halama Burger. So I recommend if you haven't been out there, give it a shot. They have some really good food. Going on down through clockwise there, we have the CSA taxes. We have 4 CSA areas. And then we also have some state and local taxes. That's mostly from our arts division. And then we also get a chunk from the city of Santa Maria to pay for part of the annexation of Waller Park. The next piece over is state and local governments. That's just some little taxes. And then we also have this year about $2.7 million in maintenance funding. That's our 18% funding. We also get $500,000 a year for deferred maintenance. And then we have some one-time funding, which included about $250,000 for trees and $350,000 for the Park and Recs master plan that we're working on. And then, of course, finally, we get about 27% of our funding from the general fund. we're proposing to adjust just very few of our fees as normal. We have about 200 fees overall we charge in the department. Today we're looking at requesting to adjust about 7 of them. Be adjusting to camping fees, some promotional items we'll discuss, a CPI index we want to use, and then also a few adjustments to the veterans fees. And then we're going to establish a couple of new fees. This slide here, kind of hard to read. It's just a layout of some of the fees at Cachuma Lake. I've highlighted the ones we were changing in yellow, and I'll go in those in detail for you. The first one in there is the annual vehicle pass. Right now we charge $90 a year for the day use pass. Benchmarking shows everybody else is right about $100, so we're recommending we go up $10 to the $100 a year. That's for the sticker to get into both Halama and Cachuma Beach. It's $100 is good for 12 months from the time you buy it. We're also recommending we update our canoe and kayak annual pass fee. It's the same as the vehicle fee, but it's for the canoe and kayak users. And that's to put it more in line with the $10 increase, will put it more in line with the benefits of the annual day use pass. Our lifeguards are recommending that we only charge pool fees at Cachuma on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. During the week, the pool is getting used, but there's not enough use to warrant having another staff member be on board to charge the fees. And then our popular hookup sites at Cachuma and Halama are even full during the holiday weekends, so we are recommending that we charge the peak fees for the holiday weekends only, and those weekends will include New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, Thanksgiving the day after, and Christmas Day. And then we are recommending to lower one set of fees, and that's for our large group reservations in the campgrounds. The $30 fee was based on a time when we were a little more labor intensive to make these reservations. We have since been able to incorporate these fees into these group areas into our online reservation system. So the $15 fee is more in line with the actual cost to administer the program. The next slide, this is Halama Beach fees, the same thing again. The day use pass and the annual day use pass and the hookup fees. And then also the large group areas. And then we'll go into this a little more detail on the next slide, but we're expecting the Halama affordable accommodations to come online later this year. So we are proposing the fees for those. As we mentioned, the Halama affordable fees are coming online. We did some research with the California Coastal Commission. There was several different ways to figure out what is an affordable fee, but there is no set definition. Their best recommendation was to use 2-star hotels in the local area. So we did a kayak search for 2-star hotels in Lompoc, and I'm a lifelong Lompoc resident, so I can guarantee these are 2 stars. So we picked some weekends in September, December, March, and July, made sure to avoid holidays or there's some community events in Lompoc like the Spring Arts Festival, the Flower Festival, made sure it wasn't those weekends. We came up with an average of approximately $120 during the peak season and $90 a night during the off season. So our recommendation is a weekday fee of $90 and a weekend fee of $120, and that's approximately 50% off what we charge now. We do have special events under us as well. A couple recommendations there. The security deposit at the courthouse grounds, we'd like to just change the wording to say, again, this is just security deposit, up to $5,000. This is mostly to cover some of the larger events, multiple day events. They do some damage, and it is the rising cost of maintenance on those. We generally very rarely keep these deposits, but we want to have the ability to try to recover the cost for repairing those. And then also our staff discovered we have a kitchen that you can rent at the Santa Barbara Vets building, and there's only a few of these in Santa Barbara, but we found out we were a little overpriced, so we actually want to reduce the fees by half and then throw in a nonprofit fee. Not a high volume there, but again, we're hoping we can be a little more competitive with what other facilities are charging in the area. We'd like to propose that the community service director be able to raise fees on those 4, just those 4 there, the tent, the RV hookups, cabins, and yurts. These fees tend to change much more regularly than our other ones, so we thought we'd tie those to the CPI. This would not be an automatic increase. We'd still do our annual benchmarking, and if we saw fees raise within the 1% to 3% range based on the CPI, which is the all Urban's consumer, Los Angeles, all items. And we'd base it on a previous 12-month period that we would just we would send out public notice and raise the fees. Generally, we're estimating that for every dollar we increase the fees, we generate approximately $70,000 more in revenue annually. So we also are looking at some promotional ideas, and we are requesting your board give us the director authority. This is mostly going to be for Cachuma Lake. Halama basically runs 80 to 90% occupancy rate year-round. Cachuma, the weekends in the summer and the holiday weekends I mentioned earlier are very busy, but during the weekdays in the summer, occupancy can go down to 40%. In the wintertime, we've seen occupancies as low as 5%. So we're trying to find a new way to encourage people to camp into our parks. We're looking at things like maybe buying 2 nights, get the third night half off, or kind of combining pay for Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday nights. Maybe we give you Thursday or Sunday half price. We also trying to work with our concessionaires for things like Groupon and access deals to where if they pay for a couple nights, maybe they can get a free boat rental or a free burger or something at the restaurant. Our concessionaires are on board with doing this. This is another way for us to increase revenues without increasing fees. At the current rate, if we increase our occupancy by 1% a year, we increase our revenues by about $75,000 a year. We did make this presentation to the Park Commission in September, and they unanimously approved it. So we're asking that the board approve the proposed fees adjustments, and they will go into effect on January 8th of 2020. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right. Do we have any questions from the public?
Chair Levanino, members of the board, we have no requests to speak from the public.
Okay. I would just ask, when we're in our kind of our downtime in the winter in Cachuma and everything, what's the health of our concessionaires there? I mean, have they come back to us renegotiations, or is this all kind of factored into the overall contract?
Chair Lavanino, it's kind of factored in the contract, but basically after 5 or 6 years of drought, this last winter, the Cachuma boat rental, I think is running like 200% year-over-year increase. So they're very happy. The restaurant just came on board in September, but they're already showing numbers that surprised me. So we're hoping with the water in the lake, a little bit of promotion will go a long way.
So I guess our federal lobbyists left, but that's something, again, that we probably would like to speak to at the federal level of allowing people to be able to get in the water at Cachuma would be very helpful to increasing attendance there. So maybe not in the winter. All right, very good. Then can I get a motion?
Move staff's recommendation.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Hart? Aye. Chair Lavanino?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous.
Very good. Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chair?
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Mr. Chair, before they go, I was going to chime in, but then the motion got made. I just think the resolution shows a deeper level of thought that staff are making, and I really appreciate that. And I hope that will continue in terms of also thinking about when there are opportunities for weekday or off-cycle renting out of large sections of park in times when we might not have full occupancy otherwise.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
All right. That takes us to item D3.
Chair Lavanino, members of the board, departmental item number 3 is from the County Executive Office. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding Chapter 50, licensing of commercial cannabis operations ordinance, storefront retail amendments, and cannabis business licensing fee ordinance amendments.
All right. Mr. Bizanich.
Chair Levanino, members of the board, thank you again for this morning. This is a follow-up to the discussion that your board had on early November last month on the options to consider a criteria-based cannabis retail selection process. to amend the existing Chapter 50 selection process, which was a random selection process. At the November meeting, the November 5th meeting, your board provided significant direction about what they would like to see, including the establishment of a criteria-based application and site visit review, ranking, and selection process. Secondly, roles and defining some of the roles in the criteria-based selection process. Identifying the kinds of things that would be required of applicants for that, including a business operations proposal and a neighborhood compatibility proposal, the evaluation and scoring methodology by either county staff or the reviewer, and application format and submittal guidelines. And so what the staff has brought back to you today are actual amendments to Chapter 50's ordinance, and those are found as attachments 1 and 2. One being a red line version, the other one being a non-red line version of those amendments to Chapter 50. And then also in front of you today, or before you today, substantively is the consideration of an amendment to the cannabis licensing fee ordinance based on these recommended changes. So here's a bit of the other changes that you requested and directed at the November meeting. One of those directions was to eliminate the 2 countywide locations, maintaining the 5 that are situated in the community plan areas that have been previously defined. So no changes to the defined community plan areas, but the amendments before you today include the elimination of those 2 countywide locations. You asked for early on in the process a community input and prioritization session in each community plan area, and we have integrated that into the amendments today. You asked for a 30-day notice of application availability, basically giving everybody equal warning about when those applications were going to be available. That was written into the ordinance amendments ahead of you. And we also included the a commitment to having the criteria-based scoring sheet available simultaneously when that notice of application is submitted. So any applicant and anybody in the community would fully see how the scoring is going to occur up front, increasing transparency and for all. And then what was really built was a 3-step process. First of all, the determination that the application can be accepted. Secondly, then an application scoring of the central parts of the application. 25% of the points available there would be for the general application components, and those are listed in the amendments. 75% for the business operations proposal, which included the pro forma and the financials for the entity that was proposing. And in order to continue forward past the application scoring process, every applicant would have to have 85% or more of the available points to continue to the next phase, which is the application ranking phase. And in that way, we would use a forced ranking process with 10% based on that original application score, 10% of the components of that, and then 90% based on that neighborhood compatibility proposal. What we've handed out today and are distributing is a bit of a flow chart here to help understanding what we did in the amendments. Council's reviewed this for us as well to make sure. But one of the things that's important to point out in this graph is that starting at the bottom is this application proposal that would be submitted, and that would be the community input starts 2 months in advance of the application period, that first round circle at the bottom. Then we would have applications would be, a notification would occur that applications are going to be available. That's that 30-day notice that I mentioned a moment ago. then the applications would be submitted within the timeframes established in the amendments, and they're either accepted based on a completeness review, and then P&D at the same time would make sure that the applicant's location is in a place where the zoning allows cannabis retail. And
Mr. President, I have a question. So
Yes.
I just want to try to get this alphabet soup stuff. So BOP is
business operation plan.
okay.
The
So you
pro
need
forma.
okay. So you need accept. You have to have all the requirements to have an application and accept the live scan result, the seller's permit, LUP.
That would be
fee?
except for those pieces. So
Okay.
in this, and so let me be really.
So you don't
clear.
even need the neighborhood compatibility plan yet to put in an application.
That is, so you would have to include the neighborhood compatibility in the business operation. What you would not have to have is the live scan results or the seller's permit.
Okay.
Or the LUP.
All right, I see that little closed
parentheses.
Parentheses.
There. Yeah.
Small print. All right, got it. I was getting worried
Yes.
there. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So yeah. No, good to be clear.
Okay.
So the only thing they went, and again, the logic here being the live scan results, they haven't had staff yet.
Right.
They're probably 9 months away from hiring anybody. So having live scan results at that early phase would obviously be, and then the use of having a seller's permit with the state of California. Again, they're 9 months out at best before they're going to be operational. So those will all have to be done as part of the business license review before business license issuance later in the process. This is now just about the selection and ranking process, period. So if the applicant basically, if they are deemed to be incomplete, the application is deemed to be incomplete, they'd be given a notice and they would have a 5-day non-acceptance protest period to come back and say, here's why we think we were complete. But that's their appeal process. For those where they are deemed to be complete, then they would pay the non-refundable fees at that moment in time. And what would then begin to happen is two parts. One, the application for the business licensing team would be for the basic things that are already baked into 50-8 for every cannabis business in the county. Those would be reviewed by our business licensing team, and then the business operations proposals would go likely to a third-party candidate for scoring. And again, the basic application components are 25% of the total available points. The business operation proposal has 75% of the points. Then a determination is made whether the aggregate score is 85% of those points or better. If they don't have 85 points, they are not going to be ranked. If they did have 85% or greater, the application and the neighborhood compatibility plan is forwarded to the selection committee, which is identified as department heads and county executive staff. They would conduct the ranking by community plan area for their neighborhood compatibility proposal, and that is tied back to the identified priorities and issues raised at the community meetings at the very beginning of the process, the first circle you saw on the chart. At that point, if they would be given a ranking based on 90% of the points being aligned with the neighborhood compatibility plan, 10% still connected with that original business plan, so there's a balancing there. And they would then be put on a forced ranking sheet based on their relative strength of those two components. And then there's a notification of who of their rank in order. That's the simplified version.
It actually is. It all gets down to the only question I have then is in that selection committee. So it says department heads and CEO's office. So who department heads, what are we talking about, and how many people, and how's that all going to shape up? Is that Mr. Gazzoni or Mr. Bazanich?
So
Mr.
I
Bozanich.
think what the original concept in the selection committee would be, it would be the director of planning and development, somebody, one of the assistant CEOs from our office, and a player to be named later in the trade with Madison
Okay.
Bumgarner or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
All right, Mr.
Another
Gazan.
department.
Chair and Supervisors, this is a recurring area where if the board actually directs membership in a body, it becomes a Brown Act body, and that doesn't work well for something like this. So this would be something that the CEO would have authority to establish on her own.
Okay, very good.
Second action today. Oh, if there are any other questions on that.
I'm just thinking about it. Okay, go ahead. Supervisor Hartman, you have a
Oh,
question?
could
about
you
it?
describe force ranking for me?
Yes, Chair and Supervisor Hartman. So forced ranking in this way is really a way of using this score sheet that will be identified with the components on the neighborhood compatibility plan. We'll look at the various components that are identified. And that's going to create 90% of the score. And the idea, though, is to look at them relative to the other applicants that are there on those on that relative strength. And so it's really a question of saying, okay, and we use this in our hiring process, frankly, quite regularly, especially at the executive level in this organization, where we identify the first person that was looked at, they go in the number one slot, and then you pull the next applicant and say, stronger, weaker, right? Yep. Yeah. So it actually worked quite well in this setting and for this purpose here. The other action today would be to consider amending the business license fees to be able to accommodate this particular process. So the board previously adopted Ordinance 5041 to establish the cannabis business licensing application and renewal fees. With this changes that we've laid out here, we're actually going to be able to amend the retail application fee to $4,100 as a part of that process. Part of that is the time that they normally would have spent going out on site visits, which won't occur until later. We can defer that in terms of the application component of the business licensing. So there will be later on site visits, but they're not included in this part of the particular process. Once that application is deemed accepted, the fee becomes non-refundable, and that's really where the substantive work's going to occur. And since the fees are directly aligned with the amount of work of county staff, nothing more, nothing less, then it does require that fee would become non-refundable at that point. Those fees were developed in consultation with our staff, with Stephen from our staff and the Auditor Controller's Office. And again, we want to make sure that those costs stay aligned with the cost of delivering that particular licensing process or that selection process. And again, not overcharging or undercharging for that activity. So before you today, these are the recommended actions, but ostensibly is to consider the introduction, first reading of the ordinance, reading the title into the record, and then setting a hearing on January 14th for the administrative agenda for the adoption or second reading of the ordinance, and reading the titles, and then also providing direction to staff and doing the same for the fee as well as for the Chapter 50 amendments, also for the fee ordinance. And then also if you wanted to provide us any other direction, and then also make the required CEQA findings. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Supervisor Hartman.
So we anticipate having a third-party outside consultant to do the assessment of the business aspect of the plan, and the fee covers that as well?
Chair Levinino, Supervisor Hartman, yes.
Seems like a bargain.
So I had a question about, I understand, I remember we were originally at 8 and we went down to 6 because we were eliminating Vandenberg Village and Cuyama. And I understand why in Vandenberg Village it makes a lot of sense because you have Lompoc right next to it and nobody would, there's a proliferation of retail in Lompoc. I was just curious if Supervisor Williams, Cuyama's not my district, but we kind of tossed Cuyama just in with Vandenberg. And I didn't know if, this is kind of our last bite at the apple, if it's something that Supervisor Williams was okay with keeping in there, or it kind of just fell in?
Well, I've done a little bit of canvassing door to door in Cuyama to try to figure out how much support there is. I have not yet determined what that is. I suppose I would be amenable to keeping one at-large spot just in case there's something we didn't think about, because I guess my philosophy on this is just because there's 5 opportunities or 6 doesn't mean we have to approve 5 or 6. I do think that we still have some discretionary control if there's something that comes along that really isn't appropriate for a given community.
Well, and I understand that if we did say it would just be one at large, then it would keep the fear up in the Vandenberg Village area. So I don't know how we would be able to. It'd be interesting if we could come up with some language that I don't know. I don't know how that would work. But I'm like, my door's not getting knocked down on people that want one in Cuyama either. But I just thought we really hadn't talked about it much. But anyway, Supervisor Hartman.
I would just add that the more clarity we can give, the less, people who want to have these businesses would be spinning their wheels and spending a lot of money. So we can always add more later on if there is demand.
Mr. Gazzoni.
Chair and Supervisors, that was really going to be my thought also, is that since this is a first reading and we need some crisp language in there, you have some crisp language right now. If you wanted to amend that in the future, that would be an option for the board. Okay. And as with all of the county's cannabis ordinances, there's a discussion at the end about this being a rapidly evolving area subject to amendment later.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question I had for Dennis is, what do you look at, what kind of timeline is baked into this process? I mean, there's 2 months up front.
Right. So, Chair Levin, kind of just as a guesstimate, if we had the second reading on January 14th, it would not become effective until February 14th, and then there's a period of time, 60 days before the application, where the community meetings are happening. So we'd have to give some advance notice to the community. Let's say we give 4 weeks of advance notice before we begin those committee meetings in March, maybe late March into early April. That would give us the priorities, and then you could begin the notification period, the 30-day notification period after that. So now we're in May, and then it's a relatively short window that was built in around the actual application period itself. And then you would have those due perhaps by the end of June. Review period might continue over the course of that summer. And then with a decision ranked and full decision probably by
September, October.
September, October, and then on to permitting and licensing after that.
Okay. Very good. I think that gives people an idea. Supervisor Hart?
Yeah, I think only on that point, I think it'd be helpful to have that at our next hearing in writing to give us something to really focus in on, and if there's any way to tighten that a little bit and all those processes. Because in addition to that, after the licensing process, the folks have to get their land use permits and go through that entire process. And now we're talking, a year and a half away at this point.
I would say you'd have the decision, Chair and Supervisor Hart. I think you'd have decisions and people in the permitting process by the fourth quarter of 2020, and then it's just a question of how fast they can move through that process through planning, and as well as through the business licensing. In some ways, a lot of those things get somewhat benefited by this front end process and the review that's going into that process at the front end rather than at the back end.
Well, it'd be helpful for me to have a better sense of that, working together with planning and development, kind of put a projected timeline of all the way through the process to get a sense of how long this is all going to take.
CEO Miyasato.
Supervisors, there was an issue we wanted to bring to your attention, and maybe Director Plowman can talk about it, and that was a question that came up in our review about looking at the community plans.
Ms. Plowman?
And maybe just a little context, this came as part of the public comment packet that your board received.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, there was a question about whether or not there was any land included in the Montecito Community Plan area that could accommodate a storefront retail operation. And I think initially it was missed, but there are 2 parcels at the end of Coast Village Road that are zoned for commercial that are in the county jurisdiction that could accommodate, in theory, a storefront retail.
Okay.
Storefront.
All right. Good to know. So, thank you. Is there any other questions or public comment?
Chair Lavanino.
You got to fill out so how about you come up, Devin, come up, give your name, because I think you're the only public comment. Come up, give your name, and then fill out a slip and bring it up to Jacqueline.
I apologize for not following the whole process. County supervisors and staff, my name is Devin Wardlow, Director of Public Affairs at Coastal Dispensary. Coastal is a locally founded and owned cannabis retail company. I want to commend the staff and the supervisors for all of their work on this ordinance. I'm very happy with how everything's been done, and you guys have just done a great job, so thank you. I have one specific piece of feedback I would like to raise for your consideration. In respect to the finance aspects of how this will be graded by a third party, I request the county supervisors establish a threshold or cap for access to capital. I would recommend that cap be $1 million. I've spoken with my CFO and a couple other cannabis companies of what it costs to start a cannabis company, and I'm happy to provide the board with detailed information as to what that looks like of an operating cost opening. But given that this is now going to be graded, the financials specifically, by a third party, and it's going to be weighted as 85% of a passing grade, I really stress that it's very important for me as a local operator that there is a cap on access to capital, because what's happened to us in multiple applications across the state is that even though let's say it's $1 million that it costs to get a store up, if MedMen comes in and they have access to capital of $20 million, they get more points, right? So if you establish a cap or a threshold, I want to make sure that it's set in a way where everybody compete in a fair way instead of a sliding scale, right? Instead of saying, okay, if you get full credit if you have $100 million in access to capital, versus just setting a cap and saying, this is what's required. If you meet the threshold, you get full credit, moving on to the next point. Because for local operators and small businesses, obviously we don't have the same type of access to capital as huge operators, multi-state operators do. And this ordinance is going to attract a lot of multi-state operators that have a much higher level of access to capital than local operators do. So I really stress and hope that the county will consider making a provision that ensures that local operators are able to compete fairly in the financial aspect of this, especially when it's graded by a third party outside consulting group. And I'm happy to provide more information on that, but that's something that I'd really like to see, and I think is really important to the general direction that you all have created in terms of emphasizing fair competition and local. So that's my only piece of feedback. Thank you so much for everything, and I appreciate it. I understand it's going to be a long process, but thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gazzani, would you like to kind of comment on that, please?
Chair and Supervisors, we had talked with the CEO's office ahead of time on a couple items, and one of those maybe was just brought up, and that is that CEO has reported in our discussions of planning to bring back a proposed scoring sheet for the board's review and approval, and that's something that could be incorporated into that process later in January.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I would like to look at that entire score sheet. Perfect. Supervisor Hartman?
Well, I just wanted to commend staff. This captured everything that I think we discussed, and it was kind of a far-flung discussion, and this has really pulled it all together. And I'm particularly excited by the way the process circles around, from the community meetings to how it's evaluated with neighborhood community compatibility at the end. So I just it is really I like how it's pulled together and really well done.
This might be the last cannabis retail meeting we have with an empty room. I got a feeling once we select somebody and have a location, we may be receiving more public input. But the more, I really like the idea of the community meetings to begin with, so that we do get input and what they're looking for in their particular neighborhood. Because as we stated before, these places are completely different from each other, and what fits in one location is probably not going to fit in another. So, great job. We really appreciate it. Doss, do you have any comment?
Yes. So I think I'm persuaded by Ms. Hartman's point that if this works out, we could always add another if there was a great movement for one in another spot. So let's just keep it as is in the staff report. And, you know, I mean, to that point, I think it's definitely going to, I think in the community plan areas in my district, it's going to need to reach a high bar. We obviously are still trying to figure out how to live together between growers that want to make this into a good and beneficial business for the community and residents that, you know, some of whom are still open to them. You know, this process of trying to figure out how to live together is complicated by, you know, definitely still a couple folks who don't seem to be able to be responsive to our expectations on odor, for example. And so, you know, I just feel like we're still dealing with some of the ramifications and some of the complications of trying to make this work in the benefit of the community. And so adding retail into it is going to be complicated. And I definitely want to say out there, because of parking, I don't see how anything on Santa Claus Lane would be really appropriate, because they're even with our freeway mitigation project on Santa Claus Lane, we're really not going to have only a small increase in parking and continued difficult parking issues in that area. And I think in Summerlin, the community, for the most part, that I've talked to, is undecided. They're waiting to see. They're waiting to see whether there will be enough community benefits to, you know, make it seem compatible with the community. And so, you know, for my part, I am going to side with wherever the Summerlin community is. And if folks who are trying to get a retail establishment going there do a great job at creating something that's compatible and beneficial to the community, like facilitating the community's need for groceries, then I'm going to be supportive. And if it's not something that's compatible with the community, then I won't be.
Very good. Okay, CEO Miyasato.
Chair Lavanino and board members, I just want to say a couple of things. One, that Barney Malekian is in Santa Barbara today, and he's been watching this, and as you know, upon Mr. Bazanich's departure, he will be taking over with Stephen Yee, who's already working on the program. So thank you, Barney. And the second thing, I just want to note that this is Dennis's last meeting here at the county, so I want to thank him on behalf of all of the folks in my office, on behalf of the board. You know, Dennis has been most notably recognized for his work on cannabis, but he's been with the county since 2008 in the Human Resources Department, and went to the CEO's office. He took a 2-year hiatus to go to another county. And he's worked on Chumash Feed Trust. This is way back in the day. He worked on Census 2010 as well as Census 2020. He worked on redistricting. Every ballot measure we've had, Dennis has touched. He worked on the air support unit. He worked on implementing the fire tax shift. There's a lot that Dennis has done for the county, and good or bad, he's just been notably noted for the cannabis work, but he's done a lot for this county during his tenure, and I just want to thank him for all his work and wish him well in his next phase of his life.
Thank you.
All right, great job, Dennis. We all had something to say last night at your going away, so it was all good. Yes, awesome job. So, Mr. Gazzoni.
Chair and Supervisors, I would just again remind the board, not for this particular action today, but the county's approach to cannabis is on two tracks, one a land use slant zoning track and the second the business license track. So even with retail, there's a possibility that some particular location might require an appealable permit where the board is the decision maker on that. So I would just remind the board and the public that the standard in this area is if the board is the appeal authority, that's a quasi-judicial decision, and would recommend that the board avoid anything that would be termed, in the language of the court, an unacceptable probability of actual bias. So it's fine for the board to express concerns and get people together, but I would just avoid taking a hard yes or a hard no position before hearing an appeal. And that's just something that will be with us as this two-track process moves forward.
Thank you for your sage advice, Mr. Gazzoni. All right. Can I get, did we vote on this one yet? Okay. Can I get a motion, please?
Yes, and I know that Mr. Brazanis has been working really hard on this, getting this done in time for him to make his way north. So it's appropriate that we move this today, and so I will make a motion to approve the staff recommendation A through H.
Second.
Second. Okay. Can I get a roll call, please?
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Hart?
Aye.
Chair Lavanino?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous.
Awesome. Okay. Very good. That takes us into closed session. Mr. Gazzoni?
Chair and Supervisors, I estimate that closed session today will take about an hour. We have two matters. The first, Murray versus County of Santa Barbara, which is a U.S. District Court case number 217CV08805. The second is Hampel versus Civil Service Commission, which is a Santa Barbara County Superior Court case 16CV02220. Again, my estimate is about an hour.
Okay, and since we have remote location, we're going to take 15 minutes before we meet up for closed session, and we'll be back after closed session. No, it was the Broadway show, Cats. Okay, Mona. There you go. All right, I'd like to reconvene this meeting of the County Board of Supervisors. Mr. Gazzoni, can we get a report out of closed session?
Chair and Supervisors, today in closed session, the board considered 2 matters of existing litigation. The first, Murray versus County of Santa Barbara. The second, Hampel versus Civil Service Commission. There are no reportable actions.
Okay, with that, we will adjourn this meeting of the County Board of Supervisors, and our next meeting is January 14th in Santa Barbara next year. Have a great holiday.